Hey Survivalists, Malcolm here, Survival Know-How. Today I want to talk about a subject that I don't think most people put a whole lot of thought into, and that is picking a proper campsite. I think the average guy, when he goes out, his campsite is determined by two things. One is just when he gets tired of hiking, and two is what the first open area is that he finds after he gets tired of hiking. But you really want to put a lot more thought into picking a proper campsite, and today I'm going to teach you 4 areas that you want to look at when picking a campsite and teach you a simple mnemonic to help you remember these things known as the 4 W's. Stay tuned. So there's 4 main things that you want to look for when picking a campsite, and luckily they all begin with W. It makes it simple to remember. So the first one is something that you probably never even thought about, and it's wind. A lot of people, when they pick a campsite, they look for a big open area like this with lots of room, and that's where they set up their tent and their fire. Personally, I look for something that is much more dense. I typically look for evergreens just to protect me from that wind. My camping setup is normally a hammock, and if you ever slept in a hammock, you know that a breeze blowing underneath the hammock, man, it will chill you to the bone. Even when you have good insulation, that wind going underneath the hammock, man, it gets you every time. So for me, I look for something that's more dense, or at least has some denseness close by to help protect me from the wind. So that's one aspect of the wind that you have to look at. Another aspect is, let's say you can't avoid the wind at all. You want to figure out what direction the wind or the breeze is blowing in, and make sure that you position your fire downwind from your tent. Okay, you don't want to have the smoke from your fire and the heat blowing into your tent or your hammock or whatever. So just be cognizant of what direction the wind is blowing, and try to have it blowing either the fire away from your tent, or at least blowing like kind of parallel. Just don't have it blowing the smoke into your tent. Alright, so that's the first thing you want to consider is wind. So the second W that you want to consider is water. So water as a hazard and water as a resource. So water as a hazard, you don't want to set your tent up on a slope, okay? Because if it rains during the night, all the water that comes down further up the slope, it's all going to flow down. And you could get, a bad flash flood that completely washes away your campsite, or you could just get a lot of water flowing down, and you're going to wake up with a wet sleeping bag and just a big wet mess in your campsite. So just be cognizant of that. You want to have a nice level ground, and you don't want to be downhill, okay? You also want to examine the ground and make sure that you're not in a dried up swamp or dried stream bed, something like that. For example, this area around here, when it rains, this whole area gets very swampy-like. It's very moist, very squishy, and you can kind of tell what areas are usually filled with water after it rains. You can just kind of look at the ground. You can see that it's dried up. There's not a lot of vegetation growing there, so you don't want to plant your campsite there just in case it does rain. Now you also want to consider water as a resource, and you want to have water within walking distance of your campsite, but don't put your campsite directly on the water. I typically try to avoid this. There are a couple of reasons for that. One is the hazard of the water. Again, if for whatever reason that river suddenly rises, if it rains further up the river and the water level rises, that could be dangerous. But also think about mosquitoes, right? Mosquitoes lay their eggs in still water, and mosquitoes are always near rivers and streams and swamps and everything like that. So to avoid bugs and insects, try to avoid being right on the water, and also other critters and animals who often come out at nighttime, and they usually go to sources of water to drink and feed. You don't want them walking right through your campsite. So there you go. That's the second W, is water, water as a hazard, and water as a resource. So the third W stands for wood, and again, wood as a hazard and wood as a resource. So when picking out your campsite, you want to avoid what's known as dead standing trees. So these are trees that have died but have not fallen over yet, or have died and started to fall over and then they get stuck in other trees, right? These things are just waiting for a gust of wind to come along and blow them and finally tip them over. So you really want to be cognizant of that because that will kill you. You also want to consider wood as a resource. You don't want to set up your campsite and then realize that you have to walk a quarter mile just to find some firewood for your fire that night. So just kind of be cognizant of that you want to have some dead trees kind of close by within walking distance that you can harvest for firewood. So that's the third W, wood as a hazard and wood as a resource. So the fourth W kind of ties into the third one, and that is Widowmakers. So Widowmakers are when branches fall off of trees, giant branches, and they get stuck in the canopy and the other branches of other trees. And again, they're just waiting for a strong gust of wind to blow them over so that they can fall out. So you really want to look up when you're setting up a campsite. So you're looking up for dead standing trees and you're looking up for Widowmakers. Unfortunately, you do hear about campers getting killed by branches that fall off during a storm in the middle of the night. One hazard that you often see is that people set up their campsites too late in the day and it's already getting dark, and because of that, they don't think to look up to look for these dead standing trees close by or any Widowmakers. So when you're picking a campsite, always remember to look up. So that's the 4 W's. So you have wind, water, wood, and Widowmakers. So I also have 2 bonus tips for picking out a campsite. One is you don't want to put it on a game trail, right? If you're looking and you can clearly see that you're on a deer trail, that's not a good spot to set up your campsite, because in the middle of the night, possums, raccoons, whatever, black bears, they are going to be traversing that trail. Those trails aren't just used by deers and people, they're used by most animals. So you don't want to set up a site there because you're going to get a rude awakening in the middle of the night. Another pro tip is if you are going out there and you're simulating a bug out situation, right? You're field testing your bug out bag, or you're ever in a bug out situation, or if you're just camping on somebody's property and you don't know whose property it is, go back to the first rule that I said about trying to camp in dense areas, right? And you want to look for concealment. You want to camp in an area with a lot of evergreens so that it's harder for people to actually see you. So keep concealment in mind if you're field testing your bug out bag, or if that's going to be a factor. So there's just 2 bonus tips for picking out a good campsite. So that's all I have for you guys today, kind of a quick video, but I want you guys to let me know down in the comments if you have any other tips that you follow when you're trying to pick out a good campsite. If this is your first time here on my channel, hit that big red subscribe button down below. I do a lot of videos about prepping and survival. And until next time, remember, knowledge weighs nothing. So long.